A secretary answers a call and suddenly begins speaking in fluent German. A millionaire nearby overhears everything. Impressed, he promotes her. But as he starts getting more involved in her professional life, she begins to question his true intentions. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. The familiar scent of industrial cleaning products clung to Sarah Muller's uniform as she straightened the last throw pillow in room 512 of the luxurious Bellamy Hotel. Her back ached from bending over countless bathtubs and beds during her 10-hour shift, but satisfaction flickered across her face as she surveyed the immaculate suite. Everything was perfect, just as it always was when she finished a room. 6 years at the Bellamy, and most guests still looked right. Through her, Sarah had mastered the art of invisibility, moving efficiently through the corridors with her cleaning cart, entering and exiting rooms like a ghost, transforming chaos into order without drawing attention to herself. It wasn't that she wanted to be invisible, it was simply what the job required. What none of her co-workers or the hotel guests knew was that Sarah Muller, 32-year-old housekeeper, held a master's degree in linguistics from Boston University, with fluency in 6 languages. Life had simply taken unexpected turns after graduation, a series of financial setbacks, a relationship that dissolved when she needed support most, and the relentless pressure of student loans that still haunted her nearly a decade later. Just temporary, she had told herself when she first applied for the housekeeping position, just until I find something in my field. But temporary had stretched into years, and with each passing season, her dreams of working as a translator or language instructor seemed to drift further from reach. Sarah glanced at her watch. It was 4:30 p.m., and her shift officially ended at 5 more. She wheeled her cart toward the service elevator, mentally calculating how much time she'd have for studying that evening. Her current project was improving her Mandarin, adding another language to her already impressive repertoire. The service phone on her cart rang suddenly, startling her. Housekeeping calls at this hour were unusual. "Housekeeping, this is Sarah," she answered in the polite, neutral tone that had become second nature. There was a pause, then a male voice began speaking rapidly in German. Sarah's brain shifted gears automatically, the language centers in her mind lighting up with recognition. "Ein Moment, bitte," she responded fluently, before continuing in German. "How may I assist you, sir?" The caller, taken aback by her perfect pronunciation and grammar, explained that he needed additional towels and was having trouble communicating his request to the front desk. Sarah assured him she would handle it personally and disconnected the call. As she gathered fresh towels for the German guest, front desk manager Melissa Cooper approached, her tailored suit and precision-cut bob contrasting sharply with Sarah's utilitarian uniform. "Did you just speak German to a guest?" Melissa asked, eyebrows raised in surprise. Sarah nodded, feeling a flush creeping up her neck. "Yes, Mr. Stein in the penthouse suite. He needed towels." "Where did you learn to speak German like that?" Melissa's tone held a note of disbelief that Sarah had grown accustomed to hearing whenever her education came up. "I have a master's in linguistics," Sarah replied, her eyes focused on organizing the towels. "German was one of my specializations, along with French, Spanish, Italian, Russian, and I'm working on Mandarin now." Melissa stared at her. "And you're cleaning rooms at the Bellamy?" The question hung in the air, familiar and painful. Before Sarah could formulate a response that wouldn't sound defensive, the elevator chimed, and a tall man in an impeccable grey suit stepped out. Both women recognized him immediately. Andrew Harrington, the hotel's most valued repeat guest. His technology investment firm had made him a fortune before he turned 40, and now at 45, he was known for his shrewd business acumen and philanthropic endeavors. "Good afternoon, Mr. Harrington," Melissa said, her voice taking on the warmer tone reserved for VIP guests. "How was your meeting with the mayor?" "Productive," he replied with a brief smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His gaze drifted to Sarah, who was attempting to make herself invisible again, a skill perfected over years of service. "Ms. Cooper, I couldn't help but overhear." He gestured toward Sarah. "Did I understand correctly that you speak 6 languages?" Sarah froze, towels still clutched in her hands. 5 fluently, sir. The 6th is a work in progress. Andrew Harrington's eyes, a penetrating blue that seemed to evaluate and assess everything they landed on, studied her with sudden interest. That's remarkable. What languages, if I may ask? As Sarah listed her linguistic qualifications, she noticed something shift in Harrington's expression. It wasn't the usual dismissive acknowledgement she received when her education came up in conversation. He was listening, really listening, with the focused attention of someone recognizing an unexpected opportunity. "And you're working in housekeeping?" he asked, echoing Melissa's earlier question, but without the tinge of disbelief. Instead, his tone suggested he was working through some internal calculation. "Yes, sir. For about 6 years now." Harrington nodded slowly. "Ms. Cooper, could I have a word with you in private?" Sarah took this as her cue to deliver the towels and retreat. As she walked away, she could feel their eyes on her back, and fragments of their hushed conversation drifted down the corridor. She heard her name mentioned several times. That evening, Sarah returned to her modest apartment in Somerville, the kind of place where the heat worked sporadically and the neighbors' arguments provided unwanted background noise. She changed out of her uniform, heated leftover pasta, and settled at her small desk with her Mandarin textbook. 2 hours later, her phone rang, an unfamiliar number with the hotel's area code. "Sarah, this is Richard Barnes, general manager at the Bellamy." His voice sounded unusually animated. "I apologize for calling after hours, but I'd like you to come in for a meeting tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock if that's possible." Her stomach tightened. In her experience, unexpected meetings rarely brought good news. "May I ask what this is regarding, sir?" "Let's just say an opportunity has presented itself," Barnes replied cryptically. "Mr. Harrington specifically requested your presence as, well..." Sleep eluded Sarah that night. Her mind raced through possibilities, most of them catastrophic. Had she inadvertently offended the hotel's most important guest? Was this about her revealing her educational background? Perhaps housekeepers weren't supposed to speak multiple languages or have advanced degrees. The irony of potentially being penalized for being overqualified wasn't lost on her. The next morning, Sarah dressed in the one business outfit she still owned from her interview days, a simple navy skirt and blazer that hung more loosely on her frame than it once had. She arrived at the hotel 30 minutes early, her stomach in knots. The executive conference room intimidated her with its polished mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston skyline. Richard Barnes greeted her with unexpected warmth, and Melissa Cooper offered a tight smile, but it was Andrew Harrington's presence that commanded the room, his customary confidence seeming slightly tempered by what looked almost like anticipation. "Ms. Mueller," Barnes began once they were all seated, "I've been made aware of your rather impressive credentials. 6 years with the Bellamy, and not once did you mention your master's degree or language fluencies on your employee profile." Sarah's hands twisted in her lap. "It didn't seem relevant to housekeeping positions, sir." "Perhaps not to housekeeping," Harrington interjected, leaning forward, "but extremely relevant to what I'm about to propose." He explained that his company, Harrington Innovations, was expanding rapidly into international markets. They had offices, opening in Berlin and Shanghai, with plans for Madrid and Moscow in the coming year. "We need someone with your linguistic abilities and cultural understanding," he said, watching her reaction carefully. "Someone who can help coordinate communication between our global teams and assist international clients when they visit our Boston headquarters." Sarah's heartbeat quickened. "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Harrington?" "Not exactly," he replied, a slight smile forming. "I'm offering you a promotion, right here at the Bellamy, as Director of International Guest Relations, a position we're creating specifically with your talents in mind. The hotel will retain your employment, but your salary and benefits will be subsidized by my company in exchange for your services when my international clients visit." Richard Barnes slid a document across the table, a contract outlining a salary that made Sarah's eyes widen. It was more than triple what she currently earned. "This can't be real," she whispered, scanning the details of health benefits, travel allowances, and performance bonuses. "I assure you it is," Harrington replied. "I've built my career recognizing untapped potential, Ms. Mueller. Yesterday, I discovered one of Boston's most valuable linguistic assets has been changing sheets and scrubbing bathrooms for 6 years. That strikes me as an incredible waste of resources." Sarah looked up from the contract, her mind racing to process this sudden change in fortune. "Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me." Something flickered across Harrington's face, an emotion Sarah couldn't quite identify. For the briefest moment, his carefully maintained facade seemed to slip, revealing something more complex beneath the successful businessman exterior. "Let's just say I recognize talent when I see it," he said, his composure quickly restored. "And I believe in second chances." As Sarah's trembling hand reached for the pen Barnes offered, she couldn't possibly know how her life was about to transform, or that Andrew Harrington's interest in her abilities concealed motivations far more personal than professional advancement. The simple act of answering a phone call in German had set in motion events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself, her worth, and the man who had just changed her life with a single decision. Sarah's first week as my Director of International Guest Relations passed in a whirlwind of introductions, training sessions, and the disorienting experience of entering the Bellamy Hotel through the grand revolving front door rather than the staff entrance at the back. Her new office, a converted meeting room on the mezzanine level with a desk, computer, and window overlooking the bustling street below, seemed impossibly luxurious after years of navigating narrow service corridors with a cleaning cart. The transformation extended beyond her workspace. Her previously invisible status had been replaced by a position of authority that required her to interact with executive staff and VIP guests. The navy blazer and pencil skirt she'd worn to the meeting had been supplemented by a small but professional wardrobe, purchased with an advance on her first paycheck. Even her apartment, the same drafty Somerville one-bedroom, somehow felt different when she returned home each evening, as though her changed circumstances had altered the very air within its walls. "I still can't believe this is happening," she confided to her younger sister Jenny during a rare phone call. Jenny had moved to California years ago, pursuing her dreams in the entertainment industry with the fearless determination Sarah had always secretly envied. "Believe it, sis. It's about time someone recognized what you're worth," Jenny replied. "Though I'm still suspicious about this Harrington guy, nobody creates a position out of thin air without wanting something in return." Sarah frowned at her reflection in the bathroom mirror as she prepared for her second Monday in the new role. "It's purely professional. He needs someone with my language skills for his international clients." "If you say so," Jenny said, her skepticism evident even through the phone connection. "Just be careful, okay? Men like that with money and power, they're used to getting what they want." Jenny's warning echoed in Sarah's mind as she stepped into the elegant lobby of the Bellamy later that morning. The space was bustling with the organized chaos of a high-end hotel at 9 a.m. Business travelers checking out, tourists planning their day, staff moving with practiced efficiency. Sarah nodded to colleagues who now acknowledged her presence, still adjusting to the strange sensation of visibility after years of being overlooked. Her morning agenda included a meeting with Richard Barnes to discuss upcoming VIP arrivals, followed by a conference call with the management team of Harrington's Berlin office. She was reviewing her notes when a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Good morning, Ms. Mueller." Andrew Harrington stood before her, as impeccably dressed as always in a tailored charcoal suit. Up close, Sarah noticed details she hadn't before, the faint lines around his eyes suggesting either stress or insufficient sleep, the slight flecks of grey at his temples, the way his confidence seemed simultaneously natural and carefully constructed. "Mr. Harrington," she replied, standing a bit straighter, "I didn't know you were back in Boston. Just arrived last night. I have meetings all week." His eyes assessed her new appearance with what seemed like approval. "I wanted to check in. How are you finding your new position?" Before Sarah could respond, Miranda Reynolds, the hotel's long-serving concierge, approached with calculated casualness. With 30 years at the Bellamy, Miranda had perfected the art of appearing helpful while gathering information. Her smile never quite reached her eyes as she addressed Harrington. "Mr. Harrington," Such a pleasure to have you back with us. Is there anything special you require for your stay? Thank you, Miranda. I believe Ms. Muller will be handling my arrangements from now on, he replied smoothly. Miranda's smile faltered slightly as she glanced between them. Of course. How convenient. She retreated with practiced grace, but not before giving Sarah a look that communicated volumes about the shifting dynamics and newly formed alliances within the hotel hierarchy. Once they were alone again, Harrington lowered his voice. You'll encounter that sort of reaction frequently in the coming weeks. People don't like change, especially when it disrupts established pecking orders. I've noticed, Sarah admitted. Half the staff treats me like I've won the lottery, and the other half acts like I've somehow cheated to get here. And which do you believe is true? The directness of his question startled her. I'm not sure I deserve this position yet, but I'm determined to earn it. Something like satisfaction flickered across his face. That's exactly why I chose you, Ms. Muller. You understand the value of proving yourself. He checked his watch, a subtle movement that somehow conveyed both wealth and restraint. I'd like you to join my dinner meeting tonight, 7 o'clock the Bristol. The clients are from Munich and your German will be invaluable. It wasn't a request so much as a directive, and Sarah found herself nodding automatically. Of course. Excellent, my driver will collect you at 6:30. As he turned to leave, he added almost as an afterthought, business formal attire. Sarah spent the afternoon oscillating between preparation for the dinner and anxiety about it. She researched Harrington's German clients, practiced professional phrases in their dialect, and tried to ignore the persistent doubt whispering that she was an imposter in designer clothing, destined to be exposed. At 6:25, she stood outside her apartment building, wearing a black dress she'd splurged on during weekend shopping. The car that arrived was not the town car she'd expected, but a sleek silver Bentley. The driver, a stoic man who introduced himself simply as Thomas, held the door with practiced efficiency. The Bristol restaurant, situated on the upper floor of the Four Seasons Hotel, offered panoramic views of Boston Public Garden and the city skyline. Sarah had passed it countless times, but never imagined dining there. The maitre d' greeted her by name and escorted her to a private dining room where Andrew Harrington stood conversing with two men in expensive suits. "Ah, Sarah," Harrington said, switching seamlessly to formal German as he introduced her to Klaus Weber and Stefan Müller of Deutsche Innovations Group. "My international relations director, who I mentioned would be joining us." What followed was the most mentally exhausting dinner of Sarah's life. For 3 hours, she navigated complex business discussions, translating nuanced proposals and counteroffers, all while maintaining the poised demeanor expected in such surroundings. The German executives, initially skeptical of her role, grew, increasingly impressed with her flawless command of their language and cultural subtleties. By the time dessert arrived, it was clear that Harrington's deal, whatever its precise nature, as much of the technical discussion exceeded Sarah's knowledge of business terminology, was proceeding favorably. Klaus Weber raised his glass in Sarah's direction. "Herr Harrington," he said in heavily accented English, "your new liaison is exceptional. Most Americans who claim to speak German can barely order a beer in Munich." Harrington's smile contained genuine pleasure as he glanced at Sarah. "Ms. Fuller exceeds expectations in many ways. I consider her recent addition to my team one of my better business decisions." The evening concluded with handshakes and promises of continued collaboration. As the Germans departed, Harrington guided Sarah toward the restaurant's terrace, where the spring air carried the faint scent of blooming trees from the garden below. "That went even better than anticipated," he said, loosening his tie slightly, in what seemed like a rare gesture of relaxation. "Your handling of Weber's concerns about the Berlin timeline was particularly impressive." "Thank you," Sarah replied, still processing the surreal experience of being valued for the very skills that had gathered dust during her years of housekeeping. Though I should admit I wasn't familiar with all the technical terms, I had to improvise. "In a few places," he chuckled, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him, "and yet you navigated it flawlessly. That's the difference between mere translation and true communication. He paused, studying her with that same evaluating gaze. You're wondering why I really hired you? The directness caught her off guard. Again. The thought has crossed my mind. Harrington leaned against the terrace railing, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. 6 years ago, I was in Tokyo, negotiating the acquisition of a software company. The deal was worth millions, but communications kept breaking down. My translator was technically proficient, but couldn't convey cultural nuances or read the room. He shook his head at the memory. I lost the deal because of linguistic misunderstandings that cost me both money and reputation. Sarah listened, sensing there was more to the story than a business anecdote. Since then, I've prioritized having genuine language expertise on my team. When I heard you speaking German, not textbook phrases, but with real fluency and cultural understanding, I recognized an asset being wasted on changing bedsheets. He turned to face her fully. I didn't create your position out of charity, Miss Muller. I did it because you're valuable. The weight of his words settled around her. Being seen, truly seen, after years of invisibility, felt both validating and terrifying. Why didn't you just offer me a position at your company? She asked. Why arrange this complicated arrangement with the Bellamy? A shadow passed across his features. I have my reasons. He straightened, professional demeanor returning. It's getting late. Thomas will drive you home. As the Bentley glided through Boston's evening traffic, Sarah replayed the conversation in her mind. Harrington's explanation made logical sense, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that there were layers he wasn't revealing. About his interest in her, about the unusual employment arrangement, about himself. Back in her apartment, she kicked off her heels and sank onto her worn sofa, mentally exhausted but strangely exhilarated. Her phone displayed 3 missed calls from Jenny and a text message. How was the fancy dinner? Still think his interest is purely professional. Sarah sighed, too tired to engage with her sister's suspicions. Instead, she opened her laptop and began what had become a nightly ritual, searching for information about Andrew Harrington. Most articles covered the same territory: his rise in the tech investment world, philanthropic endeavors, occasional appearances at high society events, always alone or with business associates, never with a romantic partner. Tonight, she dug deeper, finding a profile in Forbes from 5 years earlier. The interviewer had asked about his modest beginnings before his meteoric success. Harrington's response seemed carefully crafted. I prefer to focus on the future rather than the past. Where we come from matters less than where we're going. Sarah's research was interrupted by an email notification, a message from Harrington himself, sent just minutes ago. Ms. Muller, your performance tonight exceeded expectations. The Germans were impressed, as was I. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., my office. At Harrington Tower, we need to discuss your involvement in the Shanghai project. Transportation will be arranged. A.H. The Shanghai project. Sarah's pulse quickened. It was the most significant international expansion in Harrington's portfolio, a fact she'd learned during her research. That he would involve her so soon suggested either remarkable confidence in her abilities or an agenda she didn't yet understand. As she prepared for bed, Sarah caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror, the same face that had greeted her for years, now framed by a new haircut and highlighted by subtle makeup she'd never bothered with before. But it was her eyes that seemed different, filled with a cautious hope she barely recognized. In just 10 days, she had transformed from invisible housekeeper to valued professional. The speed of the change left her dizzy, like stepping off a merry-go-round that had been spinning too fast. Part of her waited for the illusion to shatter, for someone to reveal it all as an elaborate mistake. A more troubling thought surfaced as she drifted towards sleep. What if it wasn't a mistake but a calculation? What if Andrew Harrington's interest in her abilities concealed motives more complex than business efficiency? And most unsettling of all, what if she was stepping into a world where her value extended beyond her skills to something she didn't fully comprehend? The next morning brought a package to her door, a designer suit in precisely her size, with a note in now familiar handwriting, For your first visit to Harrington Tower, professional appearances matter. Haiti. As Sarah held the elegant grey suit against her body, Jenny's warning echoed again. Men like that, with money and power, they're used to getting what they want. The question that haunted her as she prepared for the day was deceptively simple. What exactly did Andrew Harrington want from her? Harrington Tower dominated the Boston skyline, 62 stories of glass and steel that caught the afternoon sunlight like a monument to ambition itself. Sarah stood in the marble-floored lobby, her reflection multiplied in the mirrored walls as she presented her identification to security. The new suit fit her perfectly, a fact both impressive and slightly unnerving. How had Harrington known? Her exact measurements. A sleek elevator whisked her to the 58th floor, where a receptionist with a practiced smile led her through a series of corridors to a conference room overlooking the harbor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view that made Boston look like a meticulously crafted model city, its landmarks miniaturized by distance and height. Ms. Muller. Andrew Harrington entered from a side door, accompanied by a striking woman, with silver-streaked dark hair cut in a severe bob. Allow me to introduce Eleanor Vaughan, my Chief Operating Officer. Eleanor's handshake was firm, her assessment of Sarah swift and comprehensive. So you're Andrew's linguistic find. I've heard impressive things. Her tone suggested she was reserving judgment until she witnessed Sarah's abilities firsthand. The Shanghai team will be joining us via video conference, Harrington explained, gesturing toward a large screen on the wall. They're eager to meet you, especially since I've informed them you'll be accompanying me to China next month. Sarah nearly stumbled. Next month? I wasn't aware. The timeline accelerated after last night's success with the Germans, he replied smoothly. We need someone with your particular talents on the ground in Shanghai. Before Sarah could process this development, the screen flickered to life, revealing a conference room half a world away where 3 Chinese executives waited expectantly. Harrington made introductions in English, then nodded to Sarah. Ms. Muller, would you like to continue in Mandarin? Sarah felt a surge of panic. Her Mandarin was her weakest language, still a work in progress, nowhere near the fluency of her European languages. She'd mentioned this during her initial meeting with Harrington. Had he forgotten, or was this a test? Taking a deep breath, she addressed the Shanghai team in careful Mandarin, introducing herself and expressing her enthusiasm for the project. Her grammar was imperfect, her vocabulary limited, but the executives' faces registered pleasant surprise that an American was making the effort to speak their language at all. For the next 2 hours, Sarah navigated a complex discussion about market entry strategies and regulatory challenges, switching between Mandarin and English as needed. By the meeting's end, she was mentally exhausted but reasonably confident she had performed adequately under the circumstances. As the video connection terminated, Eleanor Vaughan's expression had shifted from skepticism to measured approval. Not bad for someone who was cleaning hotel rooms 2 weeks ago, she remarked, gathering her documents, though your Mandarin needs work before Shanghai. I'm well aware, Sarah replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. I was clear about my limitations in that language, which is precisely why I've arranged for intensive tutoring, Harrington interjected. 3 hours daily with a native speaker starting tomorrow. Eleanor excused herself for another meeting, leaving Sarah alone with Harrington in the vast conference room. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the polished table as she turned to face him. You're pushing me into deep water very quickly, Mr. Harrington. His expression remained unreadable. You can swim, Ms. Muller, better than you realize. But Shanghai in a month, with my limited Mandarin, it feels like you're setting me up to fail. Something flashed in his eyes. Not anger, but something more complex. I never set people up to fail. It's a waste of resources. He moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. I'm offering you an opportunity that most people would sacrifice anything to receive. If it feels overwhelming, perhaps I misjudged your ambition. The implied criticism stung more than Sarah expected. My ambition isn't the issue. It's the pace. 2 weeks ago, I was making beds and scrubbing toilets. Now you're sending me to China to help negotiate multi-million-dollar deals. The learning curve isn't just steep. It's vertical. Harrington turned, studying her with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see past her carefully maintained composure. Tell me something, Miss Muller. In those 6 years of housekeeping, did you ever stop studying languages? Did you ever abandon your education or settle into complacency? No, she admitted. I kept learning, kept practicing. Exactly. Because despite your circumstances, you remained ambitious, determined, resilient. He took a step closer. Those qualities interest me far more than your perfect German grammar or your developing Mandarin. I'm investing in your potential, not your current skill set. The intensity of his focus made Sarah uncomfortable. Why me, specifically? There must be thousands of multilingual people in Boston with more business experience. A silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint hum of the building's air conditioning. When Harrington finally spoke, his voice had lost some of its usual authority, revealing something almost like vulnerability. I was raised by a single mother in South Boston, he said quietly. She cleaned hotel rooms at the Marriott for 27 years, had a gift for numbers, could calculate complex figures in her head faster than most people with calculators. But no education, no opportunities. His gaze returned to the window, to the city spread beneath them. She died never having used her true talents. Sarah stood motionless, absorbing this unexpected glimpse into his background, information absent from any of his public profiles or interviews. When I heard you speaking German, he continued, I saw someone whose abilities were being wasted, just as my mother's were. The difference is you still have time. He turned back to her, composed once more. So yes, I'm pushing you, because I believe you're capable of far more than you've been permitted to achieve. The revelation shifted, something in Sarah's perception of him, not entirely dispelling her wariness but complicating it with unexpected empathy. I didn't know about your background. Few do, I prefer it that way. He checked his watch. There's someone I'd like you to meet before you leave today. Harrington led her through a private elevator to the 60th floor, a space occupied entirely by his personal office and adjoining rooms. Unlike the sleek modernity of the conference areas below, this space felt almost like a living room, with leather chairs, bookshelves, and artwork that suggested actual taste rather than corporate decoration. A slender Asian woman in her 50s greeted them with a respectful nod. Professor Lin, this is Sarah Muller, Harrington said. She'll be your student for the next month. Professor Lin's assessment was swift and thorough. Mr. Harrington says you need conversational Mandarin suitable for business contexts within 4 weeks. This is ambitious but not impossible, given your linguistic background. Her English carried only the faintest accent. We begin tomorrow. Morning 6 a.m. at your apartment. After arranging the details of her intensive language training, Sarah found herself back in the private elevator with Harrington, descending toward the lobby. The silence between them felt charged with unasked questions and partial revelations. Thank you, she finally said, for sharing that story about your mother. It helps me understand your interest in my situation. He nodded once, his expression guarded again. Just don't make me regret it. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Each day began with Mandarin lessons at dawn, followed by her duties at the Bellamy, meetings at Harrington Tower, and evenings spent preparing for the Shanghai trip. Sarah's life had been completely transformed. Her schedule, wardrobe, daily interactions, and even her apartment, which now featured a better heating system thanks to an anonymous maintenance request to her landlord. The hotel staff had settled into new patterns around her elevated position. Miranda from the concierge desk maintained a brittle politeness, while others who had previously ignored Sarah now sought her attention and favor. Richard Barnes treated her with the respectful caution one might reserve for the protege of a powerful patron, which she supposed was exactly what she had become. Through it all, Harrington remained a puzzling presence, demanding excellence while providing the tools to achieve it, revealing personal insights, then retreating behind. Professional distance, showing flashes of genuine warmth followed by cool authority. Sarah found herself increasingly drawn to these glimpses behind his carefully constructed facade, even as she reminded herself of the vast power imbalance in their relationship. One rainy Tuesday, 3 days before their scheduled departure. For Shanghai, Sarah was summoned to Harrington's office for what she assumed would be another briefing on the Chinese negotiations. Instead, she found him standing by the window, holding a tumbler of amber liquid despite the early hour, his usual composure noticeably absent. "Mr. Harrington, is everything all right?" He turned, and Sarah was startled by the tension evident in his features. "The Shanghai deal is in jeopardy," he said without preamble. "Our primary investor has withdrawn, citing ethical concerns about our expansion strategy." "I don't understand. What concerns?" "Fabricated ones." He set down his glass with controlled precision. "This is Carter Bennett's doing." The name was familiar from Sarah's research, a rival investor who had once been Harrington's business partner before a very public falling out 3 years earlier. Details of their dispute had been curiously absent from media coverage. "Bennett's using his connections to sabotage this deal," Harrington continued, pacing now. "He's been trying to undermine my company for years, but this—" He stopped abruptly, seeming to remember Sarah's presence. "Forgive me. This isn't your concern. If I'm traveling to Shanghai with you in 3 days, it seems very much my concern," Sarah countered, surprising herself with her boldness. Harrington studied her for a moment, then gestured to a chair. "You're right. You should understand what we're walking into." He sat across from her, his composure returning incrementally. "Carter Bennett and I founded Harrington Bennett Investments 15 years ago. We were successful beyond our expectations, but our approaches to business began to diverge. Carter favored aggressive strategies that I found ethically questionable." Sarah listened intently, noting how carefully he seemed to be choosing his words. 3 years ago, I discovered he was involved in manipulating markets in ways that crossed legal and ethical lines. When I confronted him, he threatened to ruin me if I exposed him. We dissolved our partnership, but his vindictiveness has been persistent. "And now he's trying to sabotage your Shanghai expansion," Sarah concluded. "Yes, by spreading rumors about predatory business practices that never occurred." Harrington's hand tightened around his empty glass. "The Chinese are particularly sensitive to such accusations. We may lose this deal before we even arrive." Sarah processed this information, trying to reconcile it with the man she'd come to know over the past month, demanding but fair, ambitious but principled. "What can we do?" "We?" He raised an eyebrow, his expression softening slightly. "This is hardly within your job description, Ms. Mueller." "My job is to facilitate your international business communications," she replied. "If there's a communication problem threatening the Shanghai project, I should help address it." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Your loyalty is noted and appreciated, but this situation requires more than linguistic expertise." "Perhaps, but I'd like to understand it better." Sarah hesitated, then asked the question that had been forming in her mind. "Mr. Harrington, is there any truth to these allegations?" "Even partially." His eyes locked with hers, and for a suspended moment, Sarah felt as though he was deciding how much truth to reveal, not just about the business situation, but about himself. "No," he said finally. "I've made many compromises in my career, but I've never crossed the ethical lines Bennett has attributed to me. I'd like to believe that matters." The sincerity in his voice was convincing, but something in his expression suggested the story had more dimensions than he was sharing. Before Sarah could pursue the matter further, Eleanor Vaughan entered with a stack of urgent documents requiring Harrington's attention. "We'll continue this discussion on the plane to Shanghai," he told Sarah, as she prepared to leave. "In the meantime, focus on your Mandarin. Professor Lin reports impressive progress." That evening, as Sarah packed for the upcoming trip, her phone rang with Jenny's California number. Their conversations had become less frequent, as Sarah's new responsibilities consumed more of her time. "Hey, stranger," Jenny's voice carried across the miles. "Still climbing the corporate ladder with your mysterious benefactor?" Sarah cradled the phone against her shoulder as she folded a blouse. "It's been intense. I'm going to Shanghai in 3 days." "Wow." That escalated quickly. Her sister's tone held equal parts admiration and concern. So you're what, his personal translator now? It's more complicated than that. Sarah described the Shanghai project and the emerging crisis with Bennett's interference. Harrington seems genuinely upset by these accusations. Of course he does, Jenny replied. Men like that are always upset when they're caught. Sarah frowned. You're assuming he's guilty. And you're assuming he's innocent. Which one of us has more evidence? The question lingered after they said their goodbyes. Sarah reopened her laptop and began a more targeted search, focusing on the dissolution of the Harrington-Bennett partnership. Most articles described it as a difference in business philosophy, but one smaller financial blog mentioned rumors of financial improprieties without specifying which partner was allegedly responsible. Her research was interrupted by an email. Notification, a message from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, "What you don't know about Andrew Harrington." Sarah's finger hovered over the delete button, assuming it was spam, but curiosity won out. The message was brief. Before you go to Shanghai, you should know who you're really working for. Meet me tomorrow, 3 p.m., Boston Common by the Fountain. Come alone. A concerned party. Her first instinct was to forward the email to Harrington, but something held her back. If this was legitimate information about him, particularly information he might not want revealed, she wanted to evaluate it independently. The decision felt like a small betrayal of the trust that had been building between them, but also like a necessary step toward understanding the complex dynamics she had entered. The next day brought heavy rain, transforming Boston Common into a landscape of glistening pathways and deserted open spaces. Sarah stood by the fountain at 2:55 p.m., an umbrella providing minimal protection from the wind-driven downpour. At precisely 3 o'clock, a figure approached, a tall woman in a raincoat, her face partially obscured by both a hood and large sunglasses, despite the overcast day. "Ms. Mueller, thank you for coming." The woman's voice was cultured, confident, familiar in a way Sarah couldn't immediately place. "I'm Rebecca Bennett, Carter's wife." Sarah tensed, immediately wary. "Mrs. Bennett. I assume this meeting isn't a coincidence. Far from it. I've been following your remarkable rise from hotel maid to international business liaison." Rebecca's tone suggested she found the transformation suspicious rather than impressive. "Has Andrew told you why he's really taken such an interest in your career?" "He values my language skills," Sarah replied automatically. Rebecca's laugh held no humor. "Oh, I'm sure he values many things about you, but your languages are merely convenient justification." She reached into her coat pocket and withdrew an envelope. "Before you board that plane to Shanghai, you should see these." Inside the envelope were several newspaper clippings and photographs. The oldest, yellowed with age, showed a much younger Andrew Harrington standing beside a woman who looked strikingly like Sarah, same auburn hair, similar facial structure, even the same slight furrow between her brows when she concentrated. "That's Andrea Mueller," Rebecca explained, "Andrew's first protégé from 15 years ago, also plucked from obscurity, also given opportunities that seemed too good to be true." Sarah stared at the photo, an uneasy feeling settling in her stomach. "This woman shares my last name." "Yes, quite the coincidence." Rebecca handed her another clipping, a small obituary notice. "Andrea Mueller, age 27, unexpectedly departed. No cause of death listed, no investigation reported. Her family received a substantial anonymous donation shortly afterward." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she read. "What are you suggesting happened to her?" "I'm not suggesting anything, I'm simply showing you a pattern." Rebecca produced another photo, this one showing Harrington with a different young woman. Sophia Reyes, 2012, his second project. She disappeared after accompanying him to a business meeting in Dubai. The official story was that she decided to stay abroad, but no one's heard from her since. The rain intensified, droplets spattering. The photographs. Sarah carefully returned them to the envelope, her mind racing to process the implications. "Why are you showing me these?" Rebecca's expression hardened. "Because my husband may be many things, but he doesn't destroy people. Andrew Harrington does. His success is built on using people until they're no longer useful, then discarding them or worse." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Shanghai isn't just a business trip for him, it's where he transfers funds through channels that can't be traced. Carter discovered this during their partnership. It's what actually ended their collaboration, not the story Andrew has undoubtedly fed you. Sarah stood motionless, rain seeping through her coat, uncertain whether she was being manipulated by Rebecca Bennett or if she had been manipulated by Harrington all along. "Do your research, Ms. Mueller," Rebecca concluded, turning to leave. "And decide carefully whether Shanghai is a trip you want to take." Sarah returned to her apartment drenched and shivering, though whether from the cold rain or the disturbing information she'd received was difficult to determine. She spread Rebecca Bennett's photographs across her kitchen table, studying the faces of women who had allegedly preceded her in Harrington's attention. The resemblance between herself and Andrea Mueller was undeniable, raising questions too troubling to ignore. With trembling fingers, she began researching Andrea Mueller's life and passing. Most information had faded from easily accessible records, but by cross-referencing various sources, Sarah pieced together a disturbing narrative. A young woman with linguistic talents discovered working as a receptionist, elevated quickly through Harrington's early company, traveling internationally with him, then suddenly gone at 27. The official explanation, a heart condition, seemed suspiciously vague. Sophia Reyes proved even more elusive. Her social media accounts had been dormant for years, her professional profiles deleted. The only substantial mention was in a travel blog written by her sister, who noted in a single cryptic post, "Still searching for answers about Sophia, still hitting walls with those who should know." As the night deepened, Sarah's confusion hardened into something more focused, a determination to uncover the truth before she boarded a plane to Shanghai with a man who might be something far different than he appeared. With only 2 days remaining before their scheduled departure, she needed answers quickly. The following morning, Sarah arrived at the Bellamy Hotel earlier than usual, making her way to the administrative offices where employee records were kept. Melissa Cooper was already at her desk, eyebrows rising in surprise at Sarah's appearance. "You look terrible," she observed bluntly. "Everything all right?" "Research project," Sarah replied vaguely. "I need to check something in the personnel." "Archives, would you mind?" Melissa hesitated, but their relationship had warmed considerably since Sarah's promotion. "The archives are restricted, but I can access them. What are you looking for?" "Employment records from 15 years ago. I'm trying to verify if someone named Andrea Mueller ever worked here." Something flickered across Melissa's face. Recognition, followed by caution. "That's an interesting question. Why ask about her specifically?" Sarah's pulse quickened. "You knew her." Melissa glanced toward the open office door, then lowered her voice. "Not personally, but her name is something of a legend around here. She was before my time, but the older staff talk." She paused, seeming to debate how much to reveal. "Andrea was a Bellamy housekeeper who caught the attention of a wealthy guest, got promoted way above her qualifications, then left suddenly. There are rumors about what happened to her." "What kind of rumors?" "The kind people don't discuss openly." Melissa's expression grew serious. "Sarah, why are you asking about this?" Instead of answering directly, Sarah pulled out her phone and showed her the photograph of Andrea Mueller with the younger Harrington. "Is this her?" Melissa's eyes widened. "Where did you get this? Does it matter? Is it her?" "Yes." Melissa closed her office door. "Sarah, you need to be careful. Mr. Harrington has been very generous to you, but there are stories." "I need to know those stories," Sarah insisted. "Please." After extracting a promise of confidentiality, Melissa revealed what she knew. Fragments of staff gossip spanning decades, warnings passed between female employees, coincidences too numerous to be chance. Andrea Mueller had indeed worked at the Bellamy as a housekeeper, had indeed been promoted after impressing Harrington with her language abilities, and had indeed disappeared under circumstances that raised questions among those who knew her. The official story was that she left to pursue opportunities abroad, Melissa concluded. "But Irene from housekeeping, she's been here 30 years. She says Andrea was terrified during her last week here. Said she'd discovered something about Harrington's business practices that scared her." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. And then she died of a supposed heart condition. So they say. Melissa looked uncomfortable. Sarah, you should know. You're not the first person Harrington has taken an interest in at this hotel. There was a front desk clerk about 6 years ago, and before that a concierge. Both promoted, both gone within a year. The pattern Rebecca Bennett had hinted at seemed increasingly difficult to dismiss as coincidence or manipulation. I need to speak with Irene from housekeeping. Irene Turner, a stern woman in her 60s with observant eyes and no patience for pretense, initially refused to discuss Andrea Muller. Only when Sarah showed her the photograph and explained her own situation did the older woman relent. She was a good girl, Irene said, her voice dropping to a near whisper in the empty break room. Smart as a whip, speaking 4 or 5 languages, working here to pay off student loans. When Harrington noticed her, we all thought it was her. Lucky break. She shook her head slowly. Then she started traveling with him. Tokyo, London, Dubai, coming back different each time, more nervous, looking over her shoulder. Did she ever say why? Sarah pressed. Not directly, but once, after too many drinks at the staff Christmas party. She said she'd seen financial records she wasn't supposed to see, called it blood money. Irene's lined face hardened with old anger. Next month she was gone, heart attack, they said, 27 years old with no history of heart problems. Sarah struggled to reconcile this sinister narrative with the man who had shown her glimpses of genuine compassion and vulnerability. Could it have been a coincidence? Maybe she really did have an undiagnosed condition. Maybe. Irene didn't sound convinced, but 2 weeks before she died, she gave me an envelope, said if anything happened to her, I should mail it to a specific address. The older woman met Sarah's gaze directly. I did what she asked. 3 days later, an anonymous donor paid for renovations to the entire hotel staff area, new break room, better locker facilities, improved meal options. Hush money, Sarah whispered. That's what I figured. Irene stood, straightening her uniform. Look, I don't know what's between you and Harrington, but Andrea thought she was special to him too, right until she wasn't. Sarah spent the afternoon in a daze, mechanically performing her duties while her mind raced through scenarios and possibilities. The Shanghai trip loomed less than 36 hours away, and with each passing hour, her anxiety intensified. Was she walking into danger? Had Harrington selected her not for her linguistic talents, but because of some twisted fascination with women who resembled Andrea Muller? By evening, she had reached a decision. She needed to confront Harrington directly, to observe his reaction to her knowledge, to demand explanations for the disturbing patterns she'd uncovered. If his responses confirmed her worst fears, she would refuse the Shanghai trip and sever their professional relationship, regardless of the opportunities she would forfeit. She called his private number, half expecting to be diverted to voicemail. Instead, he answered immediately. Miss Muller, I was just thinking about you. The casual intimacy of the statement, which might have pleased her days earlier, now sent a chill down her spine. We need to talk tonight, in person. A brief pause. Is everything all right? You sound distressed. I'm not comfortable discussing this over the phone. Can you meet me? Of course. Name the place and time. She suggested a small coffee shop near her apartment, public enough for safety, private enough for a candid conversation. He agreed without hesitation, which either indicated innocence or supreme confidence in his ability to manage whatever concerns she might raise. An hour later, Sarah sat by the window of Café Nero, watching raindrops trace patterns on the glass. The evening crowd had thinned, leaving only a few scattered patrons absorbed in laptops or conversations. At precisely 8 o'clock, a black Bentley pulled up outside, and Andrew Harrington emerged, collar turned up against the persistent drizzle. He spotted her immediately, navigating between tables with the same purposeful grace he brought to boardrooms. Up close, she noticed subtle signs of strain, slight shadows beneath his eyes, tension in his jaw that hadn't been present during their last meeting. Sarah? He settled across from her, the informality of using her first name not lost on her. What's so urgent? She placed Rebecca Bennett's envelope on the table between them. I met with Carter Bennett's wife yesterday. She shared some disturbing information about you and about women who preceded me in your interest. If she'd expected shock or defensive anger, she was disappointed. Harrington's expression registered something closer to weary resignation as he glanced at the materials without touching them. Rebecca has been trying to destroy my reputation for years, he said quietly. I'm disappointed but not surprised she's targeted you as a means to that end. She showed me Andrea Mueller's obituary. Sarah watched his face carefully. A woman who looks remarkably like me, who worked at the Bellamy as a housekeeper, who impressed you with her language skills, who traveled internationally with you, and who died mysteriously young. Something flickered behind his eyes, pain perhaps or guilt. Andrea's death was a tragedy, not a mystery. She had an undiagnosed congenital heart defect. That's the official story. Hotel staff tell a different one, about a woman who discovered something called blood money in your records, who grew increasingly afraid in the weeks before her death, who left evidence with a co-worker in case something happened to her. Harrington's composure slipped momentarily, his hand tightening around his untouched coffee cup. You've been busy. I've been thorough, Sarah countered. It's what you hired me for, isn't it? Attention to detail, cultural awareness, reading between the lines? She leaned forward. The Shanghai trip is tomorrow. Before I get on that plane, I need the truth, all of it. A long silence stretched between them, punctuated by the ambient sounds of the cafe, steaming milk, quiet conversations, the muted tapping of keyboards. When Harrington finally spoke, his voice had lost its usual authoritative edge. Andrea was special, he said, his gaze fixed on some middle distance. Brilliant, determined, fearless. She helped build my company in its early days, when we were still struggling to establish credibility in international markets. He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. She also discovered that my partner, Carter Bennett, was laundering money for several unsavory organizations through our Asian investments. Sarah hadn't expected this turn. Bennett was the one involved in illegal activities? Yes, I was focused on growing legitimate business, while Carter was creating a parallel structure for moving funds that wouldn't bear scrutiny. Harrington's expression darkened. When Andrea uncovered evidence of these transactions, she came to me immediately. Together we began documenting everything, planning to turn the information over to authorities once we had conclusive proof. What happened? Someone warned Bennett. His voice had dropped almost to a whisper. The night before we were scheduled to meet with federal investigators, Andrea called me frantic, said she was being followed. I told her to come to my house where she'd be safe. His eyes closed briefly. She never arrived. Sarah felt a cold certainty settling in her stomach. You believe Bennett had her killed? I know he did, but I could never prove it. Harrington's gaze met hers directly. The medical examiner ruled it natural causes. No investigation was opened. Bennett approached me the next day with a proposal, my silence for his departure from the company. He would surrender his shares and disappear, and I would not pursue the money laundering. Allegations. And you agreed. Sarah couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. I was a coward, he admitted, the self-recrimination evident in his tone. I told myself that without Andrea's testimony, the case against Bennett would never stand, that he'd use his connections to escape justice anyway, that I could do more good by taking control of the company and ensuring it operated ethically going forward. He shook his head. But the truth is simpler. I was afraid of ending up like Andrea. Sarah processed this revelation, searching for inconsistencies or manipulations in his narrative. That doesn't explain Sophia Reyes or the other women you've apparently plucked from obscurity over the years. After Andrea's death, I became obsessed with finding people with unrealized potential, especially women facing barriers similar to what she experienced. For the first time, discomfort crossed his features. I recognize how it might appear from the outside. My interest in you was professional, but I can't deny that your resemblance to Andrea caught my attention initially. And Sophia Reyes. Did she just happen to discover something inconvenient too? Sophia is alive and well, living under a different name in New Zealand. He reached for his phone, pulled up a recent email, and pushed it across the table. The message showed a smiling woman with 2 young children, the text thanking Harrington for his continued support of her new beginning. Bennett discovered her involvement in gathering evidence about his past activities, Harrington explained. We arranged her disappearance and relocation for her safety. Sarah studied the photograph, noting the woman's genuine smile, the apparent normalcy of her new life. Why should I believe any of this? You've admitted to seeing me as some sort of replacement for a dead woman. How do I know you're not manipulating me, just as Rebecca Bennett suggested? Harrington's response was to reach into his briefcase and extract a thumb drive, which he placed on the table next to Rebecca's envelope. This contains evidence of everything I've told you: Bennett's money laundering operations, the threats against Andrea, the relocation arrangements for Sophia. I've kept it secure for years, updating it periodically as new information emerges. Why give it to me? Because in 36 hours we're scheduled to meet with the same financial group in Shanghai that Bennett used for his illegal transfers. His expression grew intent. This trip isn't just about expanding Harrington Innovations. It's about gathering the final pieces of evidence I need to expose Bennett's ongoing operations and perhaps finally prove his connection to Andrea's death. Sarah sat back, absorbing the implications. You've been planning this for years. Over a decade, he confirmed, building relationships, establishing trust, positioning myself to access records that would otherwise remain hidden. His gaze held hers steadily. Your linguistic abilities are genuinely valuable to my business, Sarah. But for this specific trip, they're essential to my larger purpose. Many of the key documents are in Mandarin and German, languages I don't speak with sufficient fluency to catch nuances or veiled references. So I'm still being used, she observed, just for a different agenda than I imagined. I prefer to think of it as being offered a meaningful choice. He gestured toward the thumb drive. Review the evidence. Decide for yourself whether this is a cause worth contributing to. If you choose not to come to Shanghai, I'll understand, completely, and your position at the Bellamy will remain secure regardless. The rain had intensified outside, blurring the street into watercolor smudges of light and shadow. Sarah studied the man across from her, no longer the flawless, enigmatic figure who had swept into her life and transformed it, but someone more complex, more human, haunted by his own failures, and driven by a mixture of guilt, justice, and perhaps genuine concern for others like Andrea. I need time to think, she said finally, gathering both the envelope and the thumb drive, and to review this evidence. Of course. He stood, leaving his coffee untouched. The plane departs at noon tomorrow. My driver will come for you at 9 if you decide to join me. He hesitated, then added quietly, Whatever you choose, I want you to know that your talents are real, Sarah. Your value isn't dependent on your usefulness to me or anyone else. After Harrington left, Sarah remained at the cafe, rain drumming against the windows as she organized her thoughts. When she finally returned to her apartment, a decision crystallizing in her mind, she found an unexpected visitor waiting in the hallway. Jenny, travel bag at her feet, concern etched on her face. Surprise, her sister said weakly. I was worried. After our last call, thought I should check on you before you flew off to China with your mysterious benefactor. Sarah hugged her fiercely, surprising them both with sudden tears. Your timing is perfect. I could really use a second opinion on something. Through the night, the sisters reviewed the contents of Harrington's thumb drive, financial records, email exchanges, surveillance photos, all painting a comprehensive picture of Carter Bennett's elaborate criminal network and Harrington's years-long quest to dismantle it. The evidence was detailed, convincing, and deeply troubling. So Bennett's wife tried to manipulate you into backing out of the Shanghai trip, Jenny summarized, as dawn light began filtering through the blinds. Because you're the key to Harrington finally getting justice for this Andrea woman. And, potentially, stopping Bennett's ongoing operations, Sarah added, rubbing her tired eyes. The question is, do I want to be involved in this? Is it worth the risk? Jenny studied her sister thoughtfully. A month ago, you were making beds and feeling invisible. Now you're at the center of what could be the biggest financial crime, bust in years. Her expression softened. The real question is, who do you want to be, Sarah? The woman who plays it safe or the one who uses her gifts to make a difference? 9 o'clock found Sarah standing outside her apartment building, 2 suitcases at her feet. Thomas, Harrington's driver, approached with a respectful nod. Ms. Muller, Mr. Harrington wasn't certain you'd be joining us today. Neither was I, she admitted, as he loaded her luggage into the Bentley. At the private airfield, Harrington waited beside the sleek corporate jet, tension visible in his stance, until he caught sight of Sarah emerging from the car. Relief washed across his features, quickly masked by professional composure. You decided to come. I decided to finish what Andrea started, Sarah replied. With some conditions. He raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. First, complete transparency from now on. No more hidden agendas or selective truths. She held his gaze steadily. Second, when this is over, whether we succeed or fail, I want your support in establishing a foundation for educational opportunities for service workers with unrealized potential. Not as your project or penance, but as a legitimate organization where my languages and your business expertise can create real change. A slow smile spread across Harrington's face. Genuine, unguarded, perhaps the first truly authentic expression she'd seen from him. Those terms are entirely acceptable. As they boarded the plane, Sarah glanced back at Boston's skyline, shimmering in the distance. 6 weeks ago, she had been invisible, her talents buried beneath the weight of circumstances and limited opportunities. Now she was flying to Shanghai to confront international financial criminals with linguistic skills that had transformed from personal passion to powerful weapon. The journey ahead would be dangerous, the outcome uncertain, but for the first time in years, Sarah Muller was exactly where she needed to be, visible, valued, and vital. Her worth wasn't defined by Harrington's recognition or anyone else's assessment, but by her own choices and capabilities. That understanding, more than any promotion or salary increase, was the true transformation in her life. The simple act of answering a phone call in German had opened a door. Walking through it had been her decision. And whatever awaited her, on the other side, in Shanghai and beyond, she would face it not as someone else's project, but as the author of her own remarkable story. Dear listeners, we hope you've been captivated by Sarah's journey from invisible housekeeper to international woman of mystery. For more emotionally charged stories like this one, we've prepared a special playlist of equally compelling narratives. Just click the link to your left. If you enjoyed this tale of hidden talents and unexpected second chances, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore life's complexities and the extraordinary potential within ordinary circumstances. Don't miss our upcoming content. We have many more twists and turns waiting for you. We look forward to reading your thoughts in the comments section below.